Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SP Patrons review today that I'm making for BranSi0730 ZHANG as part of their custom monthly music review. And if we switch over to here, we have the track on the screen. This is from an act named Led Zeppelin titled The Immigrant Song, the remaster off of their album Mothership. Now, full disclosure, I've heard of Led Zeppelin before and I've listened to a bit of their material. I actually haven't listened to The Immigrant Song in full before from start to finish, so it'll be good to to do that today and hear what we think. Let's go. It's definitely a freshness to the way it's been mastered, eh? An intense painting of the guitars to the left with this, iconic vocals. We've actually got lyrics, haven't we? Here we go. Great use of falsetto, man. Did you hear that bass run as well on the guitar that diddled it? It's fantastic, man. I'm loving the variation in different intensities vocally as well. There's actually quite a lot of that bass from the because I know that Jimmy Page is a phenomenal musician, but it's great to hear the rest of the band as well. I like the brashness of that finishing chord there. I think it does have something to do with the lyrics. That's incredibly well done. Nice. Really good song. Really good song. It was nice and short as well. I don't usually get too many short tracks to review, but I think this one used that time really well. And welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Led Zeppelin titled Immigrant Song. Now, I think this is a really well written track. The lyrics, I think, come from the perspective of like maybe the Vikings or something like that. People from a far off land coming to another, taking over, they came from snow going to fields of green and sort of like dominating. And it's interesting because it goes from, doing it for Valhalla to then becoming the people's overlords, to then talking about how people need to just make peace with the fact that they've lost because it's better, even though you're losing, than kind of resisting it. I think it gets really dark near the end. I think there's some similar overtones parallels that you could probably make towards other people that have either invaded or gotten into other countries and tried to make deals they shouldn't have, or kind of taken land that they shouldn't have and stuff like that. I think that there are interesting parallels there. The Vikings, I want to say they're a safe choice. They're not, because there are issues with, obviously there were issues with the way that things happen with the Vikings as well. But I think that is an interesting angle to go for, and I appreciate the fact that we're trying to explore it. I think the relative accessibility of the motif as well as the variations in the vocal performance help a lot. Robert Plant's vocals here are incredible. I like the way we flip between the sort of more somber, kind of softer mid-range to going up to those falsettos, those sort of shrieks there with a bit, especially with that lead melodic motif there, in that part there. There is juxtaposition and contrast between the various intensities there that makes it very interesting to listen to, even within a stanza, you know, with variations with the speed that we sing the words, and interesting. It's just a great sense of unison and sort of homeliness with the rest of the elements within the arrangement as well. There's a clear experience on the mic, and we're obviously very comfortable with what we're doing there. And I think in addition to the way the vocals are done, which make a lot of sense with the lyrics, and I think that there's like a war cry, if I may, that war cry there. It's just how the rest of the instruments within the mix go. I mean, there wasn't a guitar solo like I was expecting, but not that I'm unhappy about that. I think the bass guitar, for example, had a lot of room to breathe in the mix. It was tremendous, just with those bass runs and the parts I pointed out. The diddle-din, you know, like there's a clear complexity, but also a precision to the way that those were played, and it was very satisfying to hear those strokes being done like that. We explored not only the lower range where the root notes were, but we also were happy to go on to the upper parts as well to kind of explore that. So incredibly well done. I think in addition to that, you know, the tightness of the drum performance as well. I know the drummer in Led Zeppelin can really play as well, like songs like Moby Dick and stuff like that, if I'm not mistaken, but it's wonderful to hear that they're pocketing in a way which makes sense with the relativity of the guitar parts as well. We've got a great sense of synergy with those 8th and 16th notes, sort of kick, snare, and cymbal grooves there. There are some sort of tom parts occasionally, but it's mostly all about the vibe and the pattern moving us forward there. It was more of a track, an intermediary track, a shorter one, which maybe allowed for less sort of wiggle room from solo instruments and kept the vocals as a focal point, even though that wasn't to a lesser experience. The guitars were fantastic. I liked the bluesy kind of rockish intonations there, exploring the pentatonics as well as the majors and minors there. We had a lovely crispness to the tone and a warmth there. And while there was a little bit of sort of ruggedness to it, it never got too gritty or grim. I think a lack of a dedicated solo section on the guitars here, despite such a prominent lead guitarist, infers that we were more comfortable with allowing everyone to sort of have an equal shot in this one. I think, again, given the amount of time we had here, that was smart. The track itself, in terms of structure, had instrumental sections, verses, and choruses, and we had enough for like three goes at a verse, and I think that there are 3 turns there that elaborated further upon it, like the outro section, the last verse, or the outro part. You know, it gave us enough context to sort of iterate and think upon it. It made us reflect on maybe our position where we're at, depending on who we are and where we come from. And I think ultimately it's a tale as old as time, and it was just, I love sort of like the gaucheness of it, combined with the brashness and the tension inferred by those chords at the end of some of the runs later on the track in that outro part. But that kind of clash, there'd be a kind of a roughness, a rigidity there that refused to sort of let go of the fact that what we were doing was wrong, but people would have to deal with it regardless. I think the theme itself was intriguing. We had a track that really didn't pull any punches, but it kind of fought you in your conscience in a way that made it sort of really kind of catchy and interesting to listen to. It was clearly a competent performance vocally and instrumentally. There was great chemistry within the band itself. The transitions were seamless. The attention to music theory and composition understanding there was clear and apparent. And ultimately, I'm just really satisfied with what I heard. I think it was a great use of time. There was no filler. And the theme, it wanted to be brave and strong, but it also kind of was a bit crushing, especially when you think about when this was released. I'd say this was released more than 40 years ago, you know, at least. No, I think that's an incredible approach to it. The studio recording, mixing, and mastering was stellar. I'm really happy with how it was produced. The vocals were nice and clear. There were interesting sort of positionings of like the guitar parts and other elements within the mix there. Like if we go back to the start really briefly, and there's a great sort of like clarity and sort of appearance to the drums and the guitars and such. Everything has space and room to breathe. There's no resonant frequencies in the frequency spectrum. Things are nicely niched and EQ'd there. Nice and wide in stereo field, in part because of the panning decisions with the guitars and the drums and stuff like that, but also just because we have range to intensity for the dynamic range. And when things get bigger, they really get bigger. And it's very satisfying to listen to. They were just really great instrumental takes. There was no fixing in post, especially not for the technology they had at that time. You just really had to nail those takes. There was a great sense of meshing, not just from a post-production perspective, just because the song was written well and that the instruments didn't clash together because they had their own notches and niches in the frequency spectrum through the octave ranges. It was nice and loud without pumping. So, you know, like the limiting bus compression was handled. And what I want to give a shout out to is how this was remastered. I think they managed to make it sound more quote unquote modern without killing the dynamic range, especially as I think this was re-released in 2007, right? 2007 was like the start of like the loudness war, if not the middle of it. And the fact we managed to avoid the inherent desire to have that loud is good with this was great because it allowed the music to breathe. If you're looking to figure out what the loudness war is, just go search Metallica's Death Magnetic album and look at the ceiling and that dynamic range in that. It's pretty horrific. Like, I think the version of Metallica's tracks in the Guitar Hero game had more dynamic range than the album version, which is pretty horrific. But moving on from that, I just think that this track, Immigrant Song from Led Zeppelin, I think it's a great introduction if people haven't listened to Led Zeppelin for the first time. And I'm really glad I had the opportunity to listen to it, so thanks again to Bran for that. But thank you for watching my review of this track from an act-named Led Zeppelin titled The Immigrant Song off of the Mothership album, the remastered version. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show them some love via their various social medias and their Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe. And please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as either hell more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next SC Patrons video. Spiderhands out.